Hey guys, and welcome to the 2025 February Intermediate Tournament. And we're in the elimination stage. This would be the semifinals. Going to try and do both these semifinal matches today. I'm going to start out with Cap88 versus ProfTak. Pull up the standings here. This is the bracket that we're dealing with here. So we're going to be doing the Cap88 and ProfTak. So Germany and America. Looks like looking for their spot in the finals on this intermediate tournament. They are playing for some handmade capstones or some custom capstones. We got a few different options here. These that I've made over the past few months. Got some that were made on a fourth axis CNC and some soapstone that was turned on the lathe. And then got just some regular wood that was turned on the lathe. So some canary wood and purple heart, I believe those are. First place will get first pick out of these prizes, and then second place gets the second pick. We've got just a couple minutes before I give them the go ahead. Let me just welcome you guys to this stream, and hopefully you guys enjoy this. This is brought to you by me, brought to me by you. Without you guys supporting the U.S. Tax Association, we would not be able to run PlayTak and put these things on for you guys. So I really appreciate it, keeping this community going like you guys have. All right, let me just click through my windows here and make sure everything is working correctly. Hey. All right, and everything seems to be pretty much going well, so I will give them the go ahead in just a moment here. All right, a little bit of thumbnail fixing there. Let me give the players the go ahead and then we will kick this off. All right, so let's see what we get here. Wait for them to post their game up here. Well, I guess let's make sure that I'm still logged in. That would be a travesty. All right. Hope everybody's doing all right today on this first day of April. Not April Fools, at least not on this stream. All right, see what we get here. All right, we have a seek up, we have a board made. There's probably going to be some delay if you guys are watching the stream. So if I see chat on here, I will respond to you guys as I can, but it might be, 20-second or so delay so that the players, if they decide to pop in the stream, which they shouldn't, um, they won't get any tips or tricks. I'm not sure if they saw that, so let me just ping them on that. Okay, I pinged them, so we'll see what we get here. All right, and they're off. We have an opposite corner opening. Looks like opposite corner knight. And black addressing, I guess, potentially addressing both directions there. However, without directly blocking it, they are giving white an opportunity to expand right out the gate. So we'll see if they run along beside them or if they drop a capstone. And it looks like capstone is chosen. We have Cap88 playing white in this game and ProfTak as black. This is on a 6x6 board. The Comey is 2, so 2 will be added to black's flat score, assuming the game does not end in a road. So if the board fills or if either player runs out of pieces. White choosing to kind of claim a domain, blocking black out from the top there. They could have pivoted, taking e4. It does look like black is now occupied e4, making that pivot a little more difficult. White building on the edge. Now black can start their pivot to a vertical here. They can take f4, they can take e2, and they go with f4. White can play something like d5 here. That would go for both a vertical and a horizontal road there. They go with b4, so exploring that side of the board a little bit. So that does open up that square for black to take. So black can take d5. Or they can expand down, like I was saying earlier, at d2, kind of working on their own horizontal and vertical, kind of a mirror to white. a4. So stealing that square from white, but making some vertical progress over on that side. White can address this by a5, a3. They can ignore it. b3 is probably a decent option here. And they go with b3. There's no attack threat on the board yet, but black needs to start considering which way they want to focus on as a primary for their road building. What I call a primus, which is the first direction that you choose for a road. Um, because playing something like b2 is going to be too slow, I feel. Okay, white can cut this off with a3, or they can continue kind of building that vertical. And they do go with a3. I feel like that's a decent response there. And then if black moves their capstone over to b3, a fill in at c3 will make attack threat. Okay, black is one square away from making attack threat up here on this, on row F. Nope, not row F, row 5. However, white can make their threat first with d5, forcing black to make some sort of capture in response. They could ignore it and place at c5 here, but they do go with the threat. So now black will need to address this somehow. They can step the cap over to d3, but that allows white to kind of take c5, build up around this way. Stepping over to b3 just results in what I was saying earlier, where white replaces that c3 with their own flat and makes attack threat. Cutting with a flat here, for instance, e4 minus, probably just gets filled in by white, since black is not doing it with tempo. Looks like we got some people in the chat, or at least in the stream. So if you guys have thoughts, just shout them out. Let me know what you think. There is a delay, so what you're seeing on the screen probably about 20 seconds behind what is actually being played. Okay, black chooses to step towards their road making on that edge over on the A column. And white can just fill in here to renew that tag threat. Which they do. And now we would need to see black respond to this somehow. They can take 2b3 over to the left and make somewhat of a road building threat that direction. However, it can be stopped fairly easily. Okay, and white can choose to ignore this. They are not intact this turn. So they could build elsewhere. C5, for instance. They could take it with the capstone. That is an option. They risk having a wall dropped on C4 if they do, but it might not be the worst thing in the world. They can simply replace that stone with a B5 placement. One of the benefits of a B5 placement here is that if black does make this threat, A3 plus comes with attack threat. Okay, B5 is chosen. Now B2 is the most straightforward threat in this case. C2 gives a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more long-term kind of prospects there. And how about we silence those? Okay, so choosing the direct threat. White's responses A3 plus, B5 minus. B5 minus is chosen. Black cannot retake because they would leave a road for their opponent. Well, they cannot retake with the capstone stack. So they can move the capstone stack to the right and occupy C3. They can do something like E4, D4 minus, even F4 minus. F4 minus is a little bit far away from the action. Okay, they do go with F4 minus. Now white can replace that and start either threatening a recapture or building a vertical leg over on that side. However, probably something like E2 is fine here. The idea of E2 just being that you're one turn away from making an attack threat. And if black defends over on the left side of the board, you just pivot to the vertical. Going with F2 instead, similar idea there. F2 is a little bit further away. Okay, and a wall on E2. So kind of shutting down those shenanigans there. Probably F4 is just fine here. And if we look at some board state stats here, looks like flat count we have 2, 4, 6, 8 for white, and 7 plus 2 for black. So black is a little bit ahead on flat count. White is ahead on reserves, as in they have fewer reserves. They're closer to ending the game on their terms. Okay, and white goes with C2. Nothing necessarily wrong with C2. It's just a little bit close to the capstone at B3 and a little bit disconnected from your quickest threats that you can make. All right, now black's starting to build up some shenanigans over here. And white removing that kind of juicy stack from the line of sight of the black capstone, making their own tack threat with F2 plus. Black can retake this stack with A5 minus if they choose. They can move their capstone out of position to C3. They can use their wall that they placed. They can even do something like 2F3 left. Most all of these are only temporary solutions. Does not win back any tempo for black. It just sets white back a turn at the cost of some FCD. Oh, that was a missed road threat there. Okay, so game one goes to Cap88. All right, let me check and see if the guys want to take a quick break between games or if they want to go right into it again. That's all kinds of off. I'll have to fix that before the next one. All right, they didn't respond. I think Cap88 said he was turning off his Discord while the games were ongoing. So they may be just chatting on their private chat on PlayTak. And so we'll just wait it out and see what we find out. While we're waiting, we can kind of review this game real quick. All right, so we had a opposite knights opening. Black let white get a little bit. I mean, it's hard to say at this point in the game, but black did address some of white's threats, but white was able to continue building. Black tried to kind of make an edge crawl over here on the left, but ultimately they were a little slow based on what white was cooking up. And here on turn 12, we see that cap pin by Cap88 here, preventing that black cap from setting its sights on that stack. So black was forced to kind of capture over here on the other side of the board, then dropped a relatively early wall that was, I don't think it made its presence very well known later on. Could have been used for that later tack threat. And then we had this spread moving that stack out of the way now that the pin was undone by that f4 minus. And then that was the missed threat, so that was the end. Oh, sorry, might have a game up. All right, so game two. Let's roll this back a little bit. Players have switched colors, so ProfTak is now in white and Cap88 in black. We have adjacent corner knights opening. White begins to spread vertically, and black dropping the capstone. This E2 placement is a little bit slow, probably E5 gives you better sight lines later on. But black immediately pivoting to the horizontal. Okay. So those are the first few moves of the game. I would expect to see white try and make a run for the top side of the board here and force black to capture over onto their line. So we'd be looking at E5 and then E6 or E5 and F2. And then possibly D4 over, that capstone moving onto that line, and then white immediately dropping a capstone in its place. But we'll have to see what they decide to do. As you can see what they've got building right now, black is focused on this horizontal, this perpendicular constellation here. So when they cut off white, which they will have to do, if white pushes this threat, they will be in a better position to threaten horizontal. Okay, so white pushes the threat, and black should cut this off. They do so with the capstone. I would expect to see CD4 here. It's not required that they do CD4 here. It just is good to force that movement and then block that capstone from returning back to where it kind of wanted to be. So now you haven't neutered this threat, but you've put a severe dampener on it. So now, typically in these knight situations, especially with the adjacent corners, from what I've seen, once you stop this threat, this vertical threat on this side of the board, then you want to pivot to building your own vertical threat. C4 might be a little bit slow. White can play D5 here, D2, and just kind of build around that capstone block right here. C5 is probably fine to play here. That would kind of barricade black's vertical right here while building your own horizontal along the top. Okay, they go with D5. Now black can play C5 if they'd like. You can steal this D2 square from white as well. They could push their threat with maybe B4 or A4. A4 builds both the horizontal and the vertical. At some point, they're going to lose out on this vertical over here by white. The white is 2 placements away from making a threat, whereas black vertically is 3 placements away. Horizontally, they could make these 2 placements, A4, B4, and make a threat. However, E3 over just kind of stops that, breaks their momentum. All right, so that was a C5 and a pretty quick D2. So concentrating on this vertical threat right here. Now let's see if black feels like they can push and build one more turn, or if they need to defend immediately. And this is probably a good point for the players to take a little bit of time and think about what they want to do. Well, I say that. So this is not a threat by black, but it is a defense of that incoming road. White can kind of mirror that movement and step down D4 minus. Probably what I would have done in that situation there. D2 is perfectly fine. You're building this horizontal as well as threatening to come up. C2 plus, which renews this kind of, makes this delta here. So if you have E1 or D1, you can make that strong threat there, force a capture. Okay, black going with the straight ahead approach. And white cutting down. A wall here is perfectly fine. So SD4. Okay, just trying it with D4. E4 would be the response here. Not a mandatory response, of course. However, it takes that placement away from black, builds you closer to a road. Okay, and that is what to go with. And now black needs to decide if they're going to play something like F4 to add preparatory stone for when they capture up onto E4 again. The danger of that is that if white moves that E4 stone, which they certainly can, they make attack threat and you're forced to capture back or capture onto their line somewhere. Um, Black's other option to ignore it completely and hope that they can either throw their capstone or in some other way stop that threat next turn and use this turn to build, for instance, B2 or A3. Okay, so they're going with A3. A3 does kind of put a soft pin on that white capstone. Very similar to the pin that Cap88 used in game one of this semifinal match. At this point, I kind of feel like white needs to start a fight. So they need to force black's hand in some way, or else they're going to lose on this left side of the board. Okay, and they do. So this is not an undefendable threat, but the defense of this threat will weaken black's vertical over here. Or they'll throw the capstone up and then white basically gets a free one. So as long as white does not throw the game away with this capture right here, then by moving their capstone and giving black a road, then they should be able to come back from this. Okay, they do not give away a road. If black does not defend this, then c4 to the right is Tenyu. Well, no, they still have the cap throw, but it's close. It's they'd be in a bad way, I guess. So we'll see how black handles this. E4 would be attack threat. they could move out of the way. 2d4 left. However, that puts them back right back in the same state we were a few turns ago, where white can just play e4, kind of be back to. No, black's gained a stone. They have that a3, so they would have momentum then, but with a weakness here on c4, which would be exploitable by the capstone most likely. Cap88 taking a little bit of time to see what he wants to do here. Not sure that there's anything that black can do that's going to be, overly defensive in that state. Like a wall on it, SD1 can just be built around, I feel like. Okay, so black goes with the threat. We'll see if white chooses to renew their threat with c4 right or not. They do. And now e4 left is not required, but encouraged, I guess, by this board state. White can win this stack war with d5 minus, but you have to be careful when you win a stack war like that. What is black going to do in response? Are they going to put a wall right in the middle of your potential roadway? With this stack composition, white can run everything away. We have a stack of 6, so carry limit is reached but not exceeded. Okay, chooses a wall at d5. So now white needs to run the stack away, probably cover all these on row 4, a4 to c4. This would help interrupt black's vertical that they have building over here, as well as build their own horizontal down this way. Okay, that is what they choose to do. Okay, and another wall drop. I don't know what the bot move on this turn would be, but something like E1 is attack threat. Giving up that wall can be hard to do. Or not that wall, but giving up that stack here, difficult to do. But it might be the preferred bot move here. Because you're giving up that stack on C4, but you're giving it up with tempo. White is ahead on flat count, at least temporarily. So we are 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 2, 2, 6, 2, 6 plus 2, so 8 with Comey, 9 to 8. With white to move. So assuming they place a flat here, then we're looking at 10 to 8. Okay, E1 is on the board. We have attack threat. It'd be natural to do D4 to the left. C5 minus also works. And then black really needs to be careful of what happens on the next turn because B2 is a dual threat. Not just a placement threat on A2, but that capstone can throw over to B3 and build that road. Okay, so they go with the wall move. One thing that would be good to do here is something like just replace that, go with D3, and then try and bait the wall to come back over the other direction. So then you can make that B2 threat. Okay, black sees the threat. Infill here is fine. C3. Or again, you can do that D5 placement, D4 placement. Okay, goes with D4. Black can just fill in here at E4, but then F4 renews it. I'm not sure F4 is the greatest bang for your buck as white. It's kind of way over here. But it is a threat, and a lot of times you go with the threat. Okay, they do fill in at C3. I might be looking at A2 for white. I mean, no, I wouldn't be because that would lose you the game. This is attack threat by white by taking that b3 square, making that road, that bumpy fair of a road there. So black could throw the wall over to a4, which is what to go with. And then I'd be expecting something like a2 next. Just continue to renew that. Okay, they choose the threat in this direction. F3 plus is an option. We're bringing the wall down, which is currently pinned. However, it may not be pinned forever. And now you have gotten in your own stack's way if you had wanted to throw that for a sneaky threat at some point. I still like a2 here. Okay, and that's what white goes with. Now we'll see how black handles this. A1 plus. Okay. Not terrible by any means. A1 just kind of renews. So I need to be careful of that. Doesn't immediately renew the threat, but it does build presence down along the bottom. If white wants to pivot and be proactive about things, SC4 would be pretty much the nail in the coffin on black's roads, and then it would come down to a flat game, which I think white is ahead currently. No, they're one behind, although it is their turn to place. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, so they're tied. I said ahead, but with the Comey, 10 to 10. Okay, as black, what do you do here? B1 seems the most obvious choice. Whether that makes it right or not. Luckily, I don't have to decide because that's up to the players. But yeah, B1 looked sensible there. Okay, so now white needs to decide if they're going to attack or build or play defense. They go with attacking, so that weakens them a little bit there. I don't know if that was a bit premature or not. We'll see. Black does have that wall on a4 that can reach a2, and stop that, as well as then threatening that C2 stack, which could be potentially annoying for, ooh, that may hurt right there. Okay, so we've some defensive walls thrown down here by either side. Um, and now white's making attack threat. Another wall can be dropped on this, or the A4 wall can come down. The capstone can come down out of opposition, but don't know that that gains anything. Okay, they choose the A4 wall coming down. With these disconnected stones for black, white could just ignore this. Um, I mean, it looks scary, but you've still got 11 reserves left, so the game, only about 2/3 of the way in. Could say that, I'll make it up later. You wanted to spend one more reserve here, just drop a wall on C2 and just kind of argue that that stack is kind of impotent because it can only go one of these directions and cover very little of your flats. Self capture is on the table, but that just kind of shoots yourself in the foot. It does stop this spread, but you don't really need to stop the spread, or you defeat the purpose of stopping the spread if you cover up your own flat in the process. Could see something a little bit more creative, like the D3 capstone coming down, threatening to crush that stack on A2. Players down to 4 minutes and 2 minutes on the clock, so they are going to start feeling some time pressure here. And it's an interesting board state. The white cap is no longer pinned, so something like C3 here does make sense. Just start building that vertical again, and then kind of argue that black stones are so disconnected that you can just ignore these flats and continue. C2, I'm not sure about. I don't know if that's a time pressure decision or something I'm not seeing. But you're already covering that C2 square with this stack on A2. So you'd be better off rebuilding your pin or building up this direction, up on the row 5. Okay, black taking some of that row 5 advice there, starting to build along here. The point is almost moot just because of this wall right here on b3, but you have to try something. And at this stage in the game, I mean, we're looking at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, 2, 4, 6, 7, 9, 11, and 9 on the flats. So starting to get into desperate territory for desperate measures. Black needs to try something, even if it's not going to be an optimal strategy. They just need to go for something, build for something. Black now under a minute, so we might come to a time decision on this game. We will see what happens here. White has a threat incoming with a4 next turn. Black building along that 5 row as well, or as well again, still. I would probably just place a4, just an immediate kind of knee-jerk. Place it, put the ball back in your opponent's court. They're under a minute. And time pressure is a real thing. It's a real game decider. Okay, that's what they go with. Quick sidestep, c2 the right to kind of delay that there. And an immediate fill in. Okay, black cashing in some FCD here. So now let's look and see 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 11. So we have 10 to 11. White does have one thing they can cash out, but they will need to be careful to not get too low on their reserves without a firm plan to win in place. The white cap is pinned now from crushing. So pinned from crushing that d4 wall. We'll see if they remember that as time gets lower. Okay, we're down to 6 stones for 6 reserves for white. White cashes in some FCD as well. White can step that whole stack over. They choose not the whole stack, but enough of it. This is going to hurt. This is a threat. We'll see if it is noticed. The very natural spread of the a2 wall up to a3 prevents that. Or going in that direction does as well. And black is just placing flats. That is a time decision, and also white is running out of FCD moves. And ProfTak approaching the 1 minute mark. Okay, and with the crush. This does not come with attack threat. Just FCD threats. But let's see how they choose to handle it. B1 right. No, sorry, B1 left. Time decision, I'm guessing. White can step the B3 stack over into A3 or C3. C3 is leaving the B3 stack behind is protected by the B2 wall. That's not really a worry there. Black freeing up some of their own space here, as well as covering a flat. Let's see, as white, maybe just fill in. Nope. Okay. Black making a threat. We'll see if it is spotted. It is a stair stepper. Coming up here, B5 stone being the kind of the crux of the matter. White under 20 seconds, they may not spot it, or they may do, okay, they control the threat, but it may have cost them. Cap needs to put the ball back in their court. Yep, that's good. White can crush, and white does crush. Black just needs to make up some FCD moves here. They choose 2d5, bright 1-1. White almost under 10 seconds. The buzzer about to go off. Okay, white not making a threat currently, but coming up on one. Black should threaten here. Black does not. Black walls. White runs that stack away. Okay, we have attack threat on the board. White blocks. Sorry, black blocks. Not a threat, but close to it. White does make a threat. Black can use their wall to block. They can use their capstone to block. Okay, they choose the wall. Well, not the wall I was thinking, but they choose a wall. That does move it out of the way of the white capstone. There's an increment to this game, so that's why the players have not run out of time yet, but they are getting very low. ProfTak almost under 10 seconds again. Gonna need to make a decision quick. Okay, E2 over, that's capture, does not look like attack threat yet. Black stepping over, this is attack threat. White counters and makes their own threat. Black can step over with their wall, which they do. They've got to get rid of some of these stones, though. They're making threats, but they are not depleting anything. This is not attack threat, though it is very close. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, not attack threat. Okay. Black should crush and win the game. Not win the game, but be very close to winning the game. Crush doesn't lose, does it? Crush does not lose. Okay, the only thing to do is A2 plus, which is a tech threat. Nope. There may have been a road on the board there. Yeah, the crush did lose the game, so I was mistaken on that. When you make the crush, where is it? When you make the crush, you leave C2 open, which is a road. Ooh, but that one came down to the wire there, guys. All right, we have. Oh, looks like Rupler said it does lose. So yeah, he spotted that. Yeah, down to the wire. But looks like Cap88 comes away victorious. Had a win as white and then a win as black. And that, my friends, is time pressure. That was tough. All right, but good games to both. Very entertaining, especially that second one. Got into quite the complicated board state at the end there, and then my slow self trying to comment on it, keep up with everything that was going on. All right, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I will be back in just a few hours. We have the other semifinal match going on this afternoon, and I hope to see you guys there. Thanks. Bye.